Her divorce battle was a war zone, but she knew where the truth was buried. Welcome to our channel, where every story reveals a hidden strength. If this one moved you, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss tomorrow's powerful tale waiting just around the corner. Your journey with us is only beginning. The ballroom of the Skyline Grand Hotel in Chicago shimmered under the golden glow of crystal chandeliers. Laughter echoed against the marble walls, and the clinking of champagne flutes blended with soft jazz music floating through the air. It was Nathan Brooks' 45th birthday, an event so extravagant it seemed more like a gala than a private party. Known as one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs, Nathan was surrounded by friends, business partners, and admirers who toasted to his brilliance, charisma, and unmatched ambition. But while everyone's eyes sparkled with admiration, for the birthday man, one pair of eyes told a different story. Rachel, his wife of 12 years, sat quietly at the edge of the long banquet table. Her red dress, elegant and understated, flowed around her like silk on water. She smiled politely at jokes she had heard before, at compliments that no longer felt sincere. Inside, however, she was hollow. An ache had settled in her chest, one that words could no longer soothe. Years of being dismissed, sidelined, and emotionally abandoned had worn her down. What was once love had withered into silence. Then Nathan raised his glass for yet another toast. He was charming as always, effortlessly commanding the room's attention. But this time, he glanced at Rachel with a smirk and said, "And of course, to my beautiful wife Rachel. Let's be honest, and without me, she wouldn't be much of anything." The crowd laughed awkwardly, unsure whether to play along or wince at the cruelty wrapped in humor. Rachel didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply stood up. In one fluid motion, she reached into her handbag, pulled out her tablet, and walked toward the main screen behind the stage. The guests watched, puzzled, as she connected it to the projector. The music stopped. The room fell. Silent, a slideshow of screenshots lit up the screen. Nathan's private messages with other women. Explicit, cruel, disrespectful. Every sentence a knife, every image a betrayal. People gasped. Some turned away. Others stared in disbelief. Frozen with shock, Rachel's voice cut through the silence. Calm, clear, and steady. "This is who he is when no one's watching. This is what he thinks of me and of marriage. I'm not staying silent anymore." She unplugged the tablet, placed it back into her bag, and turned to leave. No yelling, no drama. Just a quiet resolve that shook the room far more than any outburst could. She didn't go home that night. Instead, she drove 30 miles north to her parents' house. Her mother opened the door without a word and pulled her into a hug. Her father, always a man of few words, simply walked into the kitchen and turned on the kettle. They had been waiting for this moment, not because they wanted it, but because they knew it would eventually come. That night, Rachel didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "It starts now." The morning after the party felt unreal. The designer heels Rachel had worn the night before still lay by the door of her parents' modest home in Evanston, Illinois, silent witnesses to the storm that had just passed. The sun was rising, casting a pale orange light through the kitchen window, but Rachel's world had already changed. She sat at the small dining table sipping black coffee, staring at nothing. Her mother moved quietly around the kitchen, pretending not to watch, while her father read the newspaper, though he hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. They were giving her space, not out of distance, but out of love. The kind of love that waits, that listens, that lets you fall apart and slowly rebuild. Rachel didn't need to say much. That tablet screen had said it all. By noon, she had packed up a few essentials: a duffel bag, a laptop, and a folder filled with documents she'd secretly gathered over the past few weeks. She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. But peace, she knew, often required starting over. She left behind the luxury SUV in Nathan's name, the gold-plated apartment overlooking Lakeshore Drive, and the country club membership she never enjoyed anyway. She searched online and signed a lease that same afternoon for a modest studio in Lakeview, just 650 square feet, with creaky floors and an old heater that hummed louder than it should. But it was hers, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. The first night in that apartment was cold. She wrapped herself in a thrift store blanket, drank tea from a paper cup, and stared at the ceiling. She felt fear, not of being alone, but of what came next. The silence was deafening, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with possibilities. Determined to rebuild, Rachel dusted off her old resume and reached out to an old law school contact who now worked at Hamilton and Green, a mid-sized law firm downtown. She didn't ask for favors, just an interview, a chance. They gave her one. Her first days at the firm were rough. She was rusty, unsure, and overwhelmed, but something in her had shifted. Every morning she arrived early. Every evening she stayed late. She devoured case files, wrote briefs by hand, and took on the work others avoided. Her colleagues noticed, especially Grace Anderson, the firm's managing partner, a sharp, composed woman who recognized grit when she saw it. Rachel wasn't chasing status anymore. She was chasing something real. Stability, purpose, respect at a night. She'd walk home in the cold, her heels echoing on the pavement, the city buzzing around her. She'd pass her reflection in the storefronts and almost not recognize herself, not because she looked different, but because she finally looked awake. She had no idea what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, Rachel wasn't waiting for someone else to define her future. She was already writing it herself. Rachel had barely settled into her new rhythm when the divorce proceedings began, and they were brutal. Nathan didn't take kindly to public humiliation, even less to being left. What he once mocked as her little law degree suddenly became a threat. His response was swift and calculated. A high-profile legal team, expensive, ruthless, and ready to smear her name in every courtroom they could reach. The first filing accused her of self-interest, that she left not because of betrayal, but for money. They painted her as manipulative, unstable, even ungrateful. The man who had paraded his charm in banquet halls now weaponized his power behind closed doors. Rachel didn't flinch. She had worked beside Nathan for over a decade. She helped set up their first LLC, drafted client contracts late into the night, kept spreadsheets of deals and tax records, while Nathan schmoozed investors over golf. She knew where the files were buried, literally and digitally. Every late night she stayed up, every signature she witnessed, every pitch she helped refine. She had kept receipts, not out of spite, but out of survival. She called her best friend Sophie King, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with nerves of steel and a heart of gold. Together, they built their case brick by brick. Sophie warned her, this wouldn't be clean. Nathan would drag her through the mud if it meant protecting his ego. But Rachel was no longer afraid of getting dirty. She'd lived too long swallowing pride. Nathan's team dug in deeper. They requested invasive records, leaked rumors to the press, and tried to freeze assets. Rachel kept working full-time at Hamilton and Green through it all. Every lunch break became a meeting with Sophie. Every sleepless night was spent highlighting court documents with trembling hands. Then came the threats. One evening, she returned to her apartment and found her car keyed, a deep scratch from bumper to door. Anonymous messages filled her inbox. Drop the case while you can, you'll lose everything. Sophie didn't hesitate. She called a private security consultant and had surveillance cameras installed in Rachel's hallway. Rachel installed motion lights and changed her phone number, but she didn't back down. Instead, she pushed harder at the pretrial hearing. Rachel submitted over 200 pages of documented contributions, emails, contracts, drafts, timestamps. She didn't speak with anger. She spoke with facts. Nathan's legal team tried to discredit her, but they underestimated her. The judge took notice. So did the courtroom. Her case was no longer just about assets or betrayal. It had become a symbol of something more, of what happens when a woman dares to say, enough. And though Rachel walked out of that courthouse exhausted, her back was straight, her heels steady. She hadn't just defended herself. She had reclaimed the narrative. This wasn't revenge. It was justice, earned, not demanded. And the war? It wasn't over. But Rachel had already won the first, most important battle. She refused to be erased. Victory in court didn't bring peace. Not right away. Rachel stepped out of the courthouse, that day with her share of the business officially recognized, but also with a target on her back. Nathan wasn't done. What he couldn't win legally, he tried to destroy emotionally. The threats grew bolder. One night, someone shattered her apartment's mailbox. Another time, she found a note on her windshield that simply read, "You'll regret this." The fear crept in slowly, like a fog at midnight. Not blinding, but chilling. Sophie insisted she file a report and increase security. Cameras, smart locks, pepper spray in her purse. Rachel took it all seriously. She was learning. Strength didn't mean recklessness. Courage wasn't about pretending not to be scared. It was showing up anyway. Amid all this, work remained her anchor. She poured herself into cases, researching until dawn, arguing motions with fire. Grace, her boss at Hamilton and Green, noticed. One afternoon, she pulled Rachel into her office and said, "You've got fight in you. You ever think about leading a case?" Rachel blinked, then nodded. The promotion didn't come with balloons or applause. Just a thicker file, a longer deadline, and a quiet trust that meant more than any trophy. It felt like a beginning. And then, life, as it often does, surprised her. It happened at a legal conference in Denver. Rachel had agreed to attend last minute, mainly to get away from Chicago and breathe. She was reviewing notes in the hotel lobby when a familiar voice called out, "Rachel Turner?" She looked up. It was Tyler Grant, an old law school classmate. She hadn't seen in 15 years. Back then, he was the quiet one, always 3 steps ahead in class, but never the type to show off. Now, he worked as a federal attorney and had just finished speaking on a panel about whistleblower protection. They grabbed coffee, then dinner. The conversation flowed, not forced, not flirtatious, just real. He didn't ask about the scandal. He didn't pretend to know what she'd been through. He simply listened. In a world that had felt like war, Tyler was calm. Over the next few months, they stayed in touch. Texts turned into calls. Calls turned into weekends walking along the lakefront, sharing stories, silences, and slowly, trust. He wasn't there to rescue her, and she didn't need saving. But with Tyler, she felt safe. Not because he built walls around her, but because he respected the ones she had built for herself. Rachel didn't rush. She didn't need grand gestures or declarations. What she needed was peace. And with him, peace didn't feel like absence. It felt like presence. One night, as they sat watching the city lights from her tiny balcony, Tyler said softly, "You've come a long way." Rachel smiled. "Yeah," she whispered, "and I'm not done yet." Because this wasn't the end of her story. It was the chapter where she learned how to live again, on her own terms. The past seemed determined to test her resolve. Just when Rachel finally felt steady, her apartment a little warmer, her mornings filled with purpose, her evenings occasionally shared with Tyler, the letters began arriving. Not emails, not texts, handwritten letters. From Nathan. At first, she didn't open them. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Bold, slanted, rushed. She tossed the first few straight into the trash. But they kept coming. Dozens. Some pleading. Some furious, some filled with regret so theatrical it bordered on delusion. In one he wrote, "You made your point. Now come home." In another, "You'll never find someone who knows you like I do." And then, "I've changed. Let's try again, I'll be better." Rachel didn't respond, she didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any reply ever could, because by now she understood. Nathan wasn't sorry. He was just losing control, but he couldn't reach her anymore. Not really. The woman he once belittled in front of dinner guests, the one he thought would break quietly and disappear, that woman no longer existed. Rachel had rebuilt from the inside out. Her work at Hamilton and Green flourished. She was now handling a high-profile corporate ethics case, with headlines watching and clients counting on her every word. At the firm's annual banquet, Grace introduced her as the spine of the future legal team. Applause followed. But Rachel didn't smile for the praise. She smiled because she finally believed it was true, and there was something else. In that little apartment that once felt like a hiding place, she began to feel at home. She bought cinnamon candles, a new bookshelf, a second pillow, not because she needed someone, but because she was no longer afraid of the space beside her being filled. Tyler never rushed her. He never asked her to forget. He simply showed up, with Thai takeout on hard days, with quiet strength when memories knocked her breath away. One night, as they washed dishes together in her tiny kitchen, he turned to her and asked, "Do you ever miss who you were before all this?" Rachel paused, then shook her head. "No," she said, "because I didn't know who I was back then. That was the truth." Nathan had once looked her in the eyes and asked with a smirk, "Who are you without me?" And for years, she had no answer. But now she did. Not a speech, not a dramatic declaration, just the quiet, grounded certainty of a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of steel. "I'm me," she'd say now. And that's enough. Rachel's story didn't end in heartbreak, it began with it. But where it led, that was something else entirely. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, fiercely, freely, fully. And the best part? She knew the next chapter would be hers to write. No permission, no apology, just truth. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey through Rachel's story. Her strength, her silence, her rise, all of it speaks to something many people carry but rarely show. Now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to start over? Walk away from something that once defined you, just to rediscover who you really are? Or maybe you know someone, a friend, a sister, a mother, who's walked that same road of pain, courage, and transformation. Leave us a comment below. Share where you're watching from, and tell us which moment in Rachel's story spoke to you the most. Was it the night she stood up in front of the crowd, the silence after the storm, or the quiet peace she found when she finally said, "I, me"? Your thoughts and stories matter here. Every comment helps someone else feel seen, so don't hold back. Speak your truth, just like Rachel did. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, send this video their way. You never know who needs that reminder. You are enough. We're reading every single comment. Let's talk.